The Crow Incident. The set of The Crow was, by design, a monument to gloom. It was March 1993 in Wilmington, North Carolina, and the crew was filming the scene where Brandon Lee's character, Eric Draven, is shot and killed by a drug dealer. The mood was already somber, shadowed by the legacy of Brandon's father, Bruce Lee, who had died mysteriously 2 decades prior. The lead-up was a chain of small, fatal oversights. Days earlier, a scene required a gun to be shown loaded with dummy bullets, real bullets with the powder removed, but with the primer still intact. For a close-up, the prop master had improperly created these dummies, leaving a live primer in place. During that earlier take, when the trigger was pulled, the primer had just enough force to dislodge the bullet's lead nose from the brass casing, pushing it invisibly into the gun's barrel. No one noticed. The barrel was now blocked. Later, for Lee's death scene, the same gun was loaded with blank cartridges, which have a powder charge and a paper or plastic wad, but no bullet. When the actor fired the blank at Lee from just a few feet away, the powerful blast from the blank propelled that lodged bullet fragment down the barrel with the force of a real bullet. It struck Lee in the abdomen. There was a pause. Some on set thought the blood was a brilliant special effect. Then he fell. The aftermath was a vortex of grief and investigation. Lee was rushed to the hospital where, after 6 hours of surgery, he was pronounced dead. He was 28, days from completing the film. The production was shrouded in talk of a Lee family curse. The film was completed using a body double and digital effects, its success forever haunted by the tragedy. Brandon's death led to sweeping, permanent changes in Hollywood. The mandatory use of ballistic checks, visually and with a rod, on every gun before every use, stricter control of prop ammunition, and a preference for digital muzzle flashes over functional blanks whenever possible. Midnight Rider tragedy. The morning of February 20th, 2014, on a trestle bridge over the Altamaha River in Georgia, was deceptively peaceful. The crew of Midnight Rider, a biopic about musician Greg Allman, was setting up for a dream sequence involving a bed placed directly on the train tracks. They were led to believe the production had secured permission. They had not. The railroad company, CSX, had explicitly denied the request. The lead-up was a cocktail of pressure and deception. First Assistant Director Hilary Schwartz, under direction from filmmaker Randall Miller, pushed the crew to work quickly. They were told they had a lookout, and that trains only came at scheduled intervals. It was a lie. As they were filming, a freight train, traveling at 55 miles per hour, rounded a blind curve. The lookouts scream, "A train is coming!" unleashed pure chaos. The crew, about 20 people, scrambled for their lives on the narrow bridge, with nowhere to go but the tiny gaps between the tracks. Camera assistant Sarah Jones, 27, was one of the last to run. She was struck and killed instantly, her body horrifically mangled by the train. 7 others were injured, 1 critically. The aftermath saw not just mourning, but criminal accountability. Sarah's death sparked the Slates for Sarah movement, with film slates around the world bearing her name to honor fallen crew. Director Randall Miller, First AD Schwartz, and others pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and criminal trespass. Miller served time in prison, a rare instance of a filmmaker being incarcerated for an on-set death. The tragedy became the industry's ultimate case study in location safety and the moral responsibility of those in charge. The Rust Incident. The set of Rust at the Bonanza Creek Ranch near Santa Fe, New Mexico, on October 21st, 2021, was tense. The low-budget Western had been plagued by crew walkouts just hours earlier, protesting unsafe conditions and long commutes. A skeleton crew was filming in a small, wood-framed church set. They were rehearsing a cross-draw scene where actor Alec Baldwin would pull a Colt .45 from his holster. The lead-up was a cascade of failures. The film's armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, young and inexperienced, had been tasked with both armor and props, a dual role that split her focus. Earlier that day, crew members had used the guns for target practice with live ammunition, a blatant, catastrophic violation of protocol. The guns were then returned to the set. During the lunch break, the guns were left unsecured on a rolling cart. When the crew reconvened, Assistant Director Dave Halls, without the armorer present, fetched the Colt from the cart, yelled, "Cold gun," to indicate it was safe, and handed it to Baldwin. It was loaded with a mix of dummy rounds and at least 1 live round. During the rehearsal, as Baldwin practiced drawing the weapon and pointing it towards the camera, he released the hammer. The gun fired. The live round struck cinematographer Helena Hutchins in the chest and director Joel Souza in the shoulder. In the confused, dust-moted light of the church, Hutchins stumbled back, saying, "That's no good," before collapsing. She died in the hospital soon after. The aftermath was a global media firestorm and a legal quagmire. Baldwin, who was also a producer, maintained he never pulled the trigger and that he relied on the professionals assuring him the gun was safe. The armorer and the assistant director faced criminal charges. The incident forced a painful industry-wide reckoning, leading some productions to ban functional firearms entirely in favor of airsoft guns with digital muzzle flashes. The death of Helena Hutchins, a rising artistic star, became a stark symbol of a broken safety culture where corner cutting on a rustic set had lethal consequences. The cover-up incident. The soundstage for the TV series Cover Up in 1984 was a typical hive of sitcom-style boredom between takes. John Eric Hexum, a 26-year-old model and rising star, was in high spirits. He was frustrated with his character's predicament in the scene they were shooting and was joking around with the crew to pass the time. The lead-up was a moment of lethal misunderstanding. A .44 Magnum pistol loaded with blank cartridges was on the set. Blanks, while lacking a projectile, still use a powerful powder charge sealed with a paper or plastic wad to create the muzzle flash and sound. Hexum, play-acting his frustration, put the gun to his right temple in a mock gesture of despair. He reportedly said, "Let's see if I get myself with this one," and pulled the trigger. The crew laughed, thinking it was just another gag. But the explosive force of the blank, discharged point-blank against his skull, was equivalent to a powerful hammer blow. The blast fractured his temple bone into dozens of fragments, some of which were driven into his brain with shotgun-like force. He collapsed immediately. The laughter died. He was rushed to the hospital, where he was declared brain dead. He was kept on life support for several days until his organs could be donated. The aftermath was one of profound, tragic shock. Hexum's death was not the result of a special effect gone wrong, but of a fundamental and naive disrespect for the power of a prop. It served as a grim, enduring lesson for every actor and crew member who followed. A gun loaded with blanks is not a toy. It is a real, dangerous firearm that demands the same respect and safety protocols as any other. His death reinforced the cardinal rule: never, under any circumstances, point a prop firearm at yourself or anyone else unless the camera is rolling and the shot has been meticulously planned and cleared for safety. The Twilight Zone tragedy. The Indian Dunes amusement park north of Los Angeles was transformed into a Vietnamese jungle for the night of July 23, 1982. Director John Landis was filming a segment for The Twilight Zone the Movie, a modern remake of the classic series. The scene was harrowing. Actor Vic Morrow, playing a racist who finds himself in a Vietnam air raid, must flee with two small children across a river, while a U.S. Army helicopter pursued him overhead. The lead-up was a thicket of red flags and reckless ambition. Landis was determined to achieve a visceral, dangerous realism. He ignored the explicit advice of his special effects coordinator, who warned that the sequence of low-flying helicopter maneuvers combined with large mortar explosions was too risky. Most egregiously, Landis circumvented California's strict child labor laws. The two child actors, Micah Din Lei, age 7, and Renee Shin-Yi Chen, age 6, were hired illegally, with their parents paid in cash, off the books, and present under the cover of darkness. The final take began after 2:30 a.m. Morrow, holding the two children, waded into the river as the helicopter hovered about 25 feet above. On cue, special effects detonated a series of powerful mortars on the riverbank. The shockwave from one of the blasts, larger than planned, violently rocked the helicopter. The pilot lost control. The aircraft's main rotor blades sliced through the top of a tall tree before the entire helicopter crashed down onto Morrow and the children in the shallow water. All three were killed instantly. Morrow and Lei were decapitated by the rotor blades. The aftermath was a landmark criminal trial. Landis and 4 other members of the production team were charged with involuntary manslaughter. In a 2-year trial that dissected the film industry's culture of risk, Landis defended his artistic choices. After a 10-month jury deliberation, all defendants were acquitted, a verdict that left the victims' families and many in the industry outraged. The civil suits that followed resulted in significant, undisclosed settlements. The disaster led to tighter regulations on the use of helicopters, children, and pyrotechnics on set, but it stands as one of Hollywood's most infamous examples of directorial hubris costing human lives. The Expendables 2 incident. The set of The Expendables 2, in October 2011, at a dam in Bulgaria, was meant to be the location for a signature, high-octane action sequence. The film was a love letter to 80s and 90s action heroes, and stunt work was its cornerstone. Among the crew was 26-year-old Chinese stuntman Kun Liu, a talented performer ready for the complex shot. The lead-up involved a routine but perilous stunt. Liu, doubling for an actor, was to pilot a small, inflatable boat during an explosion sequence. The stunt was choreographed so that he would speed away from a timed detonation on the shore. The mechanics of timing, speed, and distance were precise. On the day of the shoot, something went catastrophically wrong with the pyrotechnic charge. It detonated earlier than planned. As Liu's boat passed the blast point, the premature explosion sent a deadly shrapnel of debris and concussive force directly at him. A piece of shrapnel, believed to be metal from the rigging, struck him with lethal force. The aftermath on the set was immediate chaos. Fellow stuntmen and crew, trained for emergencies, rushed to his aid, but his injuries were too severe. He was pronounced dead shortly after. A second stuntman, Nuo Sun, was also seriously injured in the same blast but survived. The aftermath reverberated through the close-knit stunt community. An investigation by Bulgarian authorities focused on the pyrotechnics team and the timing mechanisms. While production was temporarily halted out of respect, it eventually continued, a stark reminder of the film industry's relentless momentum. Liu's death was not front-page news like a star's might be, but it highlighted the silent, ever-present risk that working stunt professionals accept. His death led to renewed, if quiet, calls for even more rigorous international safety standards and communication protocols, especially on overseas shoots where regulations can vary. It was a grim testament that in the world of action cinema, the most dangerous heroes are often the ones whose faces you never see.